I finished and cleaned up the papers on my desk. There it was. Somebody must have put it there for me.
Right. And all the credit for that goes to Judith Page Mitchell, who wrote.
Elizabeth Montgomery, the American television beauty icon of the 60s, once captivated millions of viewers with just a wrinkle of her nose in Bewitched. But behind the image of a charming witch on screen was a complex, strong, and rebellious woman in a conservative Hollywood. She quietly supported the civil rights movement, opposed the war, and was willing to go against the norm. Born into a seemingly perfect family, Elizabeth grew up in a fractured environment. Her private life was associated with love stories full of pain and conflict. You won't believe what happened in the last years of her life. Please subscribe, like, and watch the whole video so we can discover the whole story. Her private life, however, was far from the ideal family she often portrayed. Born into fame, Elizabeth Montgomery grew up surrounded by power and performance. Her father, Robert Montgomery, was not only a celebrated actor but a towering figure in the industry. Strong, charismatic, and deeply controlling. He believed Hollywood was a man's world and that women belonged only as accessories to their success. When Elizabeth began acting, he didn't cheer her on. He resisted, even when she invited him to appear on Bewitched, he declined. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't play second to his daughter. Her mother, Elizabeth Allen, had once been an actress too. But after marriage, she faded into the background. Soft-spoken, obedient, and emotionally distant. While Elizabeth longed to break free, her mother only wished she would settle down, avoid conflict, and keep the peace. That passivity created a painful gap. In her most vulnerable moments, Elizabeth often felt alone. And tragedy struck early. Her baby sister Martha Bryan died just over a year after birth. The event was never spoken of again. No grieving, no healing. Just silence, a silence that spread like a shadow across the Montgomery home, deepening the emotional rift that would define much of Elizabeth's inner life. Her career was bright, even dazzling. But behind the scenes, her story played out like a slow-burning tragedy. A tale of lost defiance and the lifelong search for recognition, not just as an actress, but as a daughter, a woman, and a soul of her own making. At just 17, Elizabeth Montgomery watched her family collapse. Her parents' divorce came without warning. And only 4 days later, her father, Robert Montgomery, remarried another woman. To Elizabeth, it felt like a brutal betrayal, played out in public with no regard for the daughter left behind. From that moment, their once complex bond became a quiet void. The emotional wound never fully healed. And it would echo in every relationship she had for the rest of her life. Elizabeth would go on to marry 4 times. Each man came from a world of prestige or performance. Actors, directors, artists, and yet, they all shared something in common: a reflection of her father, brilliant, ambitious, but emotionally distant. Men who admired her beauty but often tried to contain her fire. She gave everything in love, but underneath that devotion was fear. Fear of being controlled, fear of being abandoned, fear of slowly becoming the submissive figure her mother once was. Even in the final chapter of her life, after raising 3 children and living with a long-term partner, Elizabeth carried an ache that never left. She never found the space to forgive her father. And he passed away before reconciliation could ever take place. That silence between them became permanent. Her journey of independence began the day she left her family home in Paterson, New York. She was determined to carve out a life of her own, no matter how hard the path. In 1954, at the age of 21, she married Frederick Gallatin Cameron, a man born into New York high society. On paper, it looked like a perfect match: beauty and class, talent and tradition. But behind closed doors, the relationship suffocated her. Frederick, despite his wealth and education, couldn't accept that his wife wanted more than a domestic life. He wanted control. Elizabeth wanted freedom. Less than a year later, the marriage ended. It was the first time Elizabeth stood her ground. She chose her voice, her art over comfort. And she never looked back, but life wasn't about to give her peace just yet. In 1956, she married again, this time to Gig Young, a seasoned Hollywood actor with a glowing career and an Oscar to his name. On the surface, they were a golden couple. But beneath the spotlight, Gig carried a storm. Years of alcohol abuse followed him from films set to home. He was charming in public but unpredictable in private. And once again, Elizabeth found herself navigating love while protecting her own spirit from collapse. Each relationship taught her something new about who she was and what she would no longer accept. She wasn't just chasing affection. She was chasing a freedom she had been denied since childhood, a space where she could be seen, not shaped. Heard, not handled. And that search through pain, rebellion, and resilience would come to define the woman behind The Witch. There was something magnetic about Gig Young. His untamed charm, his masculine energy, his unpredictable spirit. Elizabeth Montgomery was drawn to it all. But the very qualities that captivated her soon became the source of endless conflict. Life with Gig wasn't quiet. It was a whirlwind of Hollywood parties, late nights, and social chaos that slowly chipped away at their bond. As Elizabeth's television career began to rise, especially with the early whispers of a show that would become Bewitched, a silent tension took root between them. Gig, once a celebrated name in film, began to feel overshadowed. He blamed her for his slipping fame, suggesting her success left him lost in the background. In his words, he felt drowned. And Elizabeth? She refused to dim her light just to soothe someone else's insecurity. The rivalry between them grew, not through arguments alone, but through silence, resentment, and unspoken power struggles. Elizabeth later admitted, at times, I felt like a supporting character in my own story. Those words weren't just about marriage. They were about a lifetime of stepping around men who demanded center stage. The divorce in 1963, after 7 turbulent years, wasn't just an end. It was a breaking point. One that revealed just how much Elizabeth had carried: pain from childhood, gender expectations, the emotional weight of always having to be the steady one in unstable relationships. But even as she broke away from Gig Young, she didn't fall apart. That love, as damaging as it had become, had helped shape the strength she would soon need. Beneath her calm presence, Elizabeth held back waves of emotion. She believed that silence was strength, that if she kept moving forward, kept working, the pain wouldn't catch up. But with every role she played, with every marriage she endured, another piece of her quietly fractured. During this time, a little-known incident hinted at just how deep the tension had gone. Gig Young reportedly filed a grievance over a Broadway opportunity Elizabeth was being considered for, insisting the role should have gone to someone else or, at the very least, should have elevated them both together. The act stung. It wasn't just professional jealousy. It felt like confirmation that, in love, her dreams would always come second. The experience planted a painful question in her mind. Was love a place for growth, or a cage built to contain her ambition? When Bewitched finally premiered in 1964, the world saw a radiant Samantha, the playful, powerful witch who could snap her fingers and change reality. But behind the screen was a woman who had survived the unspoken wounds of fame, family, and love. A woman who had learned that her real magic wasn't in casting spells. It was in surviving them. The real magic in Elizabeth Montgomery's life wasn't conjured through special effects or clever editing. It was the magic of choice. The magic of autonomy. In 1963, as her fame was just beginning to soar, she finalized her divorce from Gig Young. It wasn't just the end of a love story. It was a declaration. Elizabeth was choosing herself, her independence, her voice, and her career over the expectations of being someone's wife in a neatly packaged Hollywood narrative. That same year, she married William Asher. On paper, it looked like perfection. He was the director behind I Love Lucy, a proven creative force. She was television's rising star, fresh off personal heartbreak and ready to build something new. Together, they seemed like the ideal power couple of Hollywood's golden era. They founded Ashmont Productions and made their mark as both lovers and partners. They built a life in Beverly Hills, raised 3 children, and turned Bewitched into one of the most beloved shows of its time. But beneath the polished public image, their marriage was more collision than harmony. 2 powerful creatives, 2 strong visions, and over time, a widening gap neither could cross. Behind the scenes, Elizabeth was no longer the actress content with reading lines. She wanted depth. She wanted her character, Samantha, to be more than a housewife with magical powers. She challenged scripts, rewrote dialogue, and lobbied for storylines that pushed boundaries. William, a perfectionist by nature and a traditionalist by instinct, struggled with her growing insistence on creative input. The pressure escalated when Elizabeth began advocating for episodes that addressed real social issues. Women's rights, racism, themes that had no place in the polished family image ABC wanted. William resisted. He feared backlash, but Elizabeth pressed forward, using her influence to produce Sisters at Heart, a bold episode co-written by Black students that tackled racism directly. It won an Emmy. But it also widened the crack between husband and wife. Their creative conflicts soon spilled into their private life. At home, William retained a conventional sense of authority, a model Elizabeth had spent her whole life trying to escape. After 2 failed marriages, her sensitivity to control had sharpened. And in William's quiet dominance, she sensed echoes of her father. What began as a partnership built on shared ambition slowly became a battleground of quiet resentment and unspoken competition. They loved each other. They built something remarkable. But as Samantha's magic lit up millions of screens, behind closed doors, Elizabeth Montgomery was fighting for something far more personal. Her freedom. Her voice. Her right to lead, not just on screen, but in her own life. Her final choice to walk away from a life that no longer reflected her inner world wasn't a scandal. It was a quiet act of courage. The kind of decision only someone who has lived through control, betrayal, and the slow erosion of self can truly understand. In the end, Elizabeth didn't just play strong women. She became one. And that may be the most powerful spell she ever cast. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Because the real lives behind the camera are often more unforgettable than the roles they played.